As skeptical as I was about the Miami circuit when it was first announced, I think we can now all agree. Miami hosts absolute bangers. There's something about drivers getting injured and then going on to win the next race convincingly, it seems, as Lando Norris committed what could only be regarded as a demolition job, with the risk of a long first stint paying off at the chaotic Miami circuit. Not only getting his first victory, but doing it in impressive fashion, with a weekend where McLaren strategy, upgrades and driver talent truly came together in what can only be hoped as a laying down of the gauntlet for the rest of the season. But it wasn't just at the top of the field that brought the spice, as there were intense battles up and down, from the nadir of Kevin Mag-donado further proving why he shouldn't be in that Haas seat next season, to the close calls and top-tier racing seen even outside of the points positions. Want to know how the race in Miami unfolded? It's an awful lot to take in, but there are some definite winners and some really shocking losers to look into. And stick around, because with all the upgrades we were expecting some movement, but just how much of it is down to the circuit and just how worried do Red Bull have to be moving forwards. So just how did events at Miami unfold? The race was electric from the start, with an immediate scrambling of the grid as Sergio Perez absolutely sent it into the first corner, nearly wiping out both Red Bulls immediately and giving Sainz, Norris and Leclerc a massive scare and shunting back the rest of the field behind them. Sainz had got an advantage over his teammate off the line, but it was very quickly wiped away by the dive-bombing Red Bull. Piastri came out as the healthiest from the Turn 1 fracas and proceeded to conduct an impressive race, despite what would occur down the line, with the Ferraris in close pursuit. Ominous signs emerged early, as Max didn't do the normal race plan of disappear down the road and hold a 5-second lead. Instead, Piastri managed to maintain pace to the Red Bull, with the 1.5 to 2 second gap being present from Sergio's early antics and threats from behind, rather than the man in front disappearing and holding that advantage. The main battle over the first stint was Norris consistently putting pressure on Sergio Perez, who upon pitting released the cage to McLaren, who started pumping fastest laps out despite his now aging tyres. All the other drivers blinked first, whether down to the Bollard-induced VSC or down to strategy calls, but Lando Norris stayed out and spent the next 5 laps at a steady pace. Then strikes another Mag-donado special, causing yet another incident and racking up more penalties and controversies in one race weekend than most drivers do in a year. By the time the safety car emerged, Lando was already past the pits, with the rest of the field over 11 seconds behind him, giving him the opportunity to further stretch his advantage and guarantee a comfortable switch to 5-lap fresher tyres. Upon the race restarting, Lando dropped the field and never wavered as he ran a smooth race to the finish, which has to go down as being one of the most feel-good wins of recent years, with even Fred Vasseur getting involved with the post-race celebrations. A man that was shockingly less smooth was Carlos Sainz, with the Ferrari driver seeing red and putting pause to Piastri's impressive performance. On any other day, the Aussie would have been a firm favourite for driver of the day, and deservedly so, as not even getting stopped on track by Sainz's bullish attempt into the final corners and receiving damage caused Piastri to slow his roll, as Piastri looked like he could have even recovered back to the points if not for the team's request to play it safe as possible and not risk a safety car due to Norris's victory hanging in the balance. Andrea Stella has demonstrated that McLaren's rise through the last season was no fluke, with the team principal heralding in an era of change at the Woking team. Following the race, Zak Brown made it clear just how important Andrea has been to the team's rise over the past 18 months. This is long overdue. This is a very popular win amongst the fans, the drivers. So many drivers went up to him and congratulated him. He drove perfectly and the car was very fast. A lot of credit to the leadership team. Andrea Stella, I couldn't ask for a better team principal. He listens, he communicates, he's thoughtful, he's hardworking and demanding. That's how everyone is at the factory. It's all starting to come together. Zak would also insinuate that the changes was solely due to a slight shuffling of individuals and the introduction of Stella, unlocking the potential latent within the team. They've now gone on to take massive steps forward for 2 consecutive seasons, having started as the weakest team at preseason testing last year. The extent to the upgrades brought to Miami was massive, with 10 individual elements being added to the car, with Ted Kravitz revealing that the current McLaren spec which Lando had available to him is the car that the team wanted to start the season with, having yet again made discoveries late on to their preseason development. When asked if he was surprised at Verstappen's lack of answers, Andrea Stella replied, We knew that the car was quick, although it's a bit of a surprise, but we take it positively and we take it for the future as well. This victory is for Gilles de Ferran. And all of this begs the question, was this weekend a track-specific fluke, or has McLaren really captured lightning in a bottle twice? Over the whole weekend, McLaren had shown threats of being the best car on the grid, however they never seemed to be able to put everything together. Whether the shunt suffered by Norris in the sprint and the discovery of the upgraded performance rendering Piastri's Chimera car somewhat an unknown quantity, it was a really hard weekend to read up until the lights went out on Sunday. The answer will be waiting for us in Imola, where with it being the first European leg, there will be even more upgrades arriving to the paddock, especially for Ferrari, so we may not still get a clear picture as to what the true pecking order is, unless Verstappen goes back to business as usual, but given his inability to disappear down the road, it does seem that we may have a more interesting season ahead of us than originally anticipated. Clearly, we can't judge the layout based off of one race, however, if upgrades can be this potent with 18 races still to come, then we can certainly hope that there will still be some pretty major twists still to come. Something that perhaps indicates that this is somewhat of a dud weekend for Red Bull as a whole was the performance of Sergio Perez, who has enjoyed being a good driver in a mega car for the first part of the season, but was somewhat found out when the team overall seemed to have a less dominant showing. Given Perez started on the second row in both races and never looked to threaten the cars ahead, instead maintaining position with some impressive defending, Perez must be hoping that this race is just an exception for Red Bull, rather than the new norm dictated by teams progressing. When giving his thoughts as to where it went wrong for him this weekend, Checo was clearly disappointed in the performance of the car. Overall, just a very unfortunate race, one of those where we simply didn't have the pace today. When asked if the lack of pace was a surprise, Checo said, "We knew that the Ferrari was strong yesterday. We did some changes that probably in hindsight weren't the right direction, and so we lost out a bit to the other teams." Having come mere inches from wiping out his teammate at the start of the race, the weekend could have certainly gone worse for Perez. However, if you cast your mind back to the height of the criticism leveled against him, it was for races like today, where he was unable to capitalize on the car underneath him to the same extent as his teammate. Clearly, Perez is nowhere near the depths of his previous season, but given how silly the current silly season is and the talent available in the paddock, Checo should be doing everything possible to make himself undeniable for Red Bull and finishing quite a way off of his teammates, with both cars from their nearest rival in the Constructors' Championship in between them, is certainly leaving the door more open for doubt than it needs to be. I like Checo. I was happy when he was given the opportunity at Red Bull, and I think that some of the hate that he's received has been entirely unwarranted. But at a time where he should be ensuring that he is running the tightest ship possible, I can't help but maybe feeling that he should be doing more. Red Bull had an entirely dominant start to the season up until Miami, but even at a race where Verstappen retired, Perez was unable to capitalize and secure a win down under. He did what he could to hold up Norris, and he was certainly unlucky in terms of the safety cars, both virtual and non-virtual, but it's hard to shake the feeling that some other drivers on the grid would pose more of a threat to move forward through their rivals rather than just bringing defensive capabilities to the table. Defending is fine when your car is fast enough to be on the front row, but if this weekend is anything to go by, then Red Bull may need to be looking ahead of them as well as paying attention to what is in their mirrors in the future. But what do you think? We don't think Checo is in immediate danger, but just how long would a run of average form last before questions start being asked again? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.